share my slides. I'm gonna go ahead and share that. So if you can't see it or you want accessibility, please go ahead and use that link, and I'll share it again at the end. Aloha, aloha kako. I'm coming into this chat, this Zoom room this morning from beautiful Hawaii, in the middle of the Pacific. It is about 70 something degrees here right now. I didn't go outside yet, so, but it is a beautiful morning here. And I hope you guys are experiencing a beautiful morning as well. Oops, let me just introduce myself. So I'm Rochelle Piʻilani. H stands for Hussey and Kaaloa. I'm interim associate dean of graduate division. I'll get into some of this. To me, it doesn't really matter about all these titles. It's just where I am right now and situated in the work that I do. But they do have some importance in being able to do the work that I do. So I will acknowledge that. I'm in the graduate division right now, but I'm also a tenure track associate specialist that has been in Kamakakuakalani Center for Hawaiian Studies in the School of Hawaiian Knowledge, Hawaii Nui Akea, for quite a few years. So just placing myself so you understand where I'm coming from and the work that I do. But my story will tell you all that you need to know, hopefully. And if not, you can ask me at the end. So I'm going to jump in. You see my title, and hopefully voice, choice, and story will come out strong for you as we go through. And I share with you today what I prepared to share. And so I want to start with acknowledge many things. First, I want to acknowledge ELCC for the invitation to present. And I really am honored by this. I'm honored to have met some of you at AECT last year and to continue this relationship. But I want to acknowledge all of you for being present, because it takes time and energy to bring ourselves to this space and place. I also want to acknowledge all the spaces and places that you are coming from, and that where I am situated in, like I just shared with you, because that's important, because that's where our work goes on. And finally, I want to share with you about this picture. So I chose this picture because it represents for me and resonates with me students that have gotten together in a space and a place to harvest taro, which is a staple here in Hawaii. And they are washing and preparing that taro for cooking to feed a group of students that are going to gather for an event. All these hands to me represent the contribution to all the work and the story that we do in our lives. And I want to acknowledge those hands that have contributed to my work. You may not know them, but they are present with me and the story that I bring to you today. And then I also want to acknowledge for all of us those hands that will come after me, which are some of these students we see in this that are doing this work now to continue the work to feed all of us, us as educators, us as students, and our students we teach, and also what we call the Lahui Kanaka, which is humanity. Because we cannot feed ourselves all the time alone. We have to feed ourselves together. And so I just want to acknowledge that as I go into my story, because it does ground a lot of the work that I do. So who am I, right? So like I said, I'm going to introduce a little bit. I'm a Kanaka Maoli. I'm a Native Hawaiian. I was born, raised in the Pacific on an island, on multiple islands, actually. I've lived on a few of them. And that means something, right? Because as a Kanaka Maoli, being born from birth, you learn that your ecosystem is essential to the work that you need to do and to survive, actually. And so we malama aina, which aina is that which feeds us, not just land. So a lot of people think of malama aina when they hear it, and it's very published now in research that it's the land, like the earth. It's not. It's everything from the earth to the ocean, anything that feeds us. And so we depend on the land to feed us and the ocean. And in that knowing, in that way of knowing and beliefs, we honor the sky, all that comes with it, that falls from it into our mountains, down into our streams, down to the ocean, into that ecosystem which feeds us. But I also come from a people that are cultivators and farmers, navigators, because we live on an island. We had to know how to visit other people that are craftsmen and craftswomen, people that perform and enjoy performing, and ultimately storytellers. I am also a mother. And these are my boys, my 5 boys. Don't mind that 2 of them are fuzzy. And we all reside here in the Pacific. So I'm also an educator. These are some screenshots. It will kind of date me a little bit. Hopefully you won't see that. But I'm proud of the time that I spent in technology. And so it might date me a little bit that I've been in it for a while. And then these are just some I tried to find some screenshots that represent my instructional designer work. And these are just a few shots over time. And, you know, it's hard if you're an instructional designer, like I've been for a bit, it's hard to find those real visuals that capture what you do because we do so much. So I'll just leave that there. But that's who I am in part. I want to start with my story. So I'm going to jump right in. And I want to start with technology. This has always been the foundation across, right? Of my work. And I'm sharing this image and you might laugh at it, but this was one of the first collages I made in Photoshop back in the day when I was first experiencing technology. So again, dating myself, but showing you that from the very start, technology resonated with me. I ran to it. I was an early adopter. I liked technology because I always found there was problems to solve. And I liked that. That was my passion. My story is long and different. I'm not going to share all of it, but I'll just tell you that I never jumped into technology to do technology like I do today. I was actually on path in my bachelor's to enter law school, finishing my bachelor's, my last semester entering law school. And I fortunately had to take an upper division class. Many of you might be familiar with that. And I ended up taking an educational technology class. That pivoted my whole world. From that one educational technology class, I became a teacher. And it was a different type of entry into teaching. I wasn't prepping to be a teacher in a BA. I got into teaching because I saw the need to learn more technology and to take that technology out into the schools. And so began my path, technology plus teaching. And at that time in the journey, it was really about technology adoption. It was just getting all those tools out there into the students' hands so that they could adopt it, right? And that's what I did. I wrote grants, I had initiatives, I worked with Native serving nonprofit organizations. And what I did was I just spent years taking technology out to the schools and using some of the technologies that were present in the schools to help students understand how it could be a tool for them. And at this time, I leaned heavy onto a Native Hawaiian way of knowing or belief that I had and was taught from a child. It's called makahana ka'ike. And maka is I, hana is to work, ka'ike is the knowledge. But basically, it translates to in doing one learn. So you got to get your hands dirty. You got to use it. You got to try it. You got to touch it. That wasn't commonly accepted with technology back then. It was like, we bought this with so much money. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. And that's what I heard all the time. So my journey was long, taking a lot of different tech tools into the schools. And you can see all the wires and the connection that we had to deal with back then. And a lot of these images resonate with me. I still keep them close to me because it resonates my work on different islands, different tools that I would take from video to writing, literacy, to we call huaka'i, where we did like field trips and we went out and experienced stuff, but we used technology to document that and tell their story. And that's kind of the journey that I had in those arenas. So what was happening to that time that pivoted me to where I am today? Well, one thing was I had to overcome a whole bunch of challenges. That made us stronger. This picture I share with the three girls is classic of the time. You know, we had 5 digital cameras in taking it into a class of 30 kids, and 3 or 4 had to partner to go out and use it, right? So it was access, it was money. I say system barriers because I'm talking about the tech coordinators who had the sacred key that no one could unlock the closet and use the tech unless they let you, right? So you had to be friends with them. And all those kind of barriers, and even literacy. Did the students have the technology literacy to be able to, one, use the tools because they were fascinated by, they were passionate about using it, but the literacy to know and make decisions around what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, or how they make meaning out of what they were creating with these tools, right? And ultimately in the big green, I struggled with the haves or have-nots. So nationally, right? Who was getting the technology, who was not? And for Hawaii, we weren't getting the technology. So it was a lot of the initiatives that we were doing that were getting us there. And so it became very obvious to me that students needed technology for their future. And we needed to figure out a way to do that. And that's why I leaned heavy on technology adoption at the time. I share this picture of Moku. He was an undergrad communications major doing digital photography. And he came along on some of our initiatives as a student worker to help train students, but also to document for us, right? I share this picture because it tells you where we pivoted. So I was reflecting on all the haves and have-nots. I was getting angry. I was getting frustrated with the system. And I was doing a workshop. We had a whole bunch of us out there from the university, and Moku was there. And at the end of the workshop, one of the students came up to me, and this was the interaction. Miss, you know Mr. Moku? I said, yeah. He's like, is that his camera? I said, yeah, that is his camera. And he's like, is Mr. Moku Hawaiian? I said, yes, he's Hawaiian, just like you and me. And he said, so do you think one day I can have a camera like that and take pictures and tell them and show what my road is? That floored me. It still makes me think about it and tear up a little bit, emotional, that just from that work we were doing, the students could see themselves behind that technology. They could see the work and they could see themselves in it. And that's when we stopped and started talking about story. The technology assisted them in telling their stories, and they could see it just from one little workshop. A 4th grade boy saw himself in Mr. Moku and wanted to have a digital camera one day. And it wasn't possible then, but we made it possible. We left some cameras at the school, but that pivoted my work, right? So technology adoption became very clear to me, and these were some student projects that they worked on, that it was mo'olelo for us. In Native Hawaiian view, mo'olelo is storytale, myth, history, tradition, literature, legend, journal, log, essay, chronicle, record, art. It's everything. It is story, but it's so much more. And it could mean so much. And so we started to reflect on that. Wow. So we're giving them tools. They're adopting in some places. It was really rough, but they're also telling their stories. And that became really important to me and grounded my work. At the same time, I was reading this statement. Today's students live in a global knowledge-based age, and they deserve teachers whose practice embraces the best that technology can bring to learning. I don't know how much it's changed, but it definitely made us think about the role teachers had. We were the ones taking the tech to the students, right? That was all the initiatives were. We weren't really working with the teachers. Some jumped in, some didn't. We weren't pushing that. But I realized because technology adoption was so important and mo'olelo, that we were getting to 100 mo'olelo. Because if we got out there and touched 100 students and they were able to use a tool to tell a story, that's 100. But if maybe we worked with the teachers, maybe we get 1,000 mo'olelo, right? So that began the next pivot. You can see. I went back to higher ed. I went back and worked with, and out of community, went back to higher ed. And that was a whole nother journey. So I went back and advanced my degrees. This is where I took on the training to be an instructional designer. And ultimately, I spent years training teachers to use technology with a lot of federal grants that were coming out at the time, but especially pre-service teachers. And it shifted from technology adoption to now technology integration conversations. So the story was changing now. What does technology integration look like, right? What does it mean? The story was changing now. No longer was it just, here's a tool, use it to do this one assignment or experience. No, it was, how can we dialogue and discuss to use this digital camera in science and math and social studies, in any content area, and it not be a tool, it be just normal. Oh, I want to show how I did evidence of this. I'm going to use a digital camera. And so those are the conversations we were having at higher ed at the time. And again, leaning very heavy onto our Hawaiian ways of knowing, as we talked about it. So a'o aku a'o mai. It means in Hawaiian to teach and to learn. It's a reciprocal relationship. A'o means to learn and to teach at the same time. It's the whole. That you cannot teach if you're not learning, and you cannot learn if you're not teaching. So it's a reciprocal relationship that goes together. So a'o aku a'o mai. This is what we leaned into with our work with technology integration. And we, actually for us, technology integration meant a'o aku a'o mai. And so it became a time of us realizing we were always knowledge consumers, right? We were always teaching and learning, but now we became knowledge producers with the technology. And what did that mean? What did that look like? And how did it shape what we were doing? For me, it went back to my goal. I wanted 100 stories, then I had 1,000 stories. Now I could possibly have 10,000 stories about who we are as a people, our beliefs, our ways of knowing, from our students telling their stories, not from somebody else telling our story. And that was important. And so my work continued. I became the instructional designer I should be, but life caught up with me, like it catches up with all of us. And I had to get a real job. because it was fun. It was fun doing all of these initiatives and grants, but I really did have to get a new job, a real job. And so I took a tenure track position in Kamakakōkalani Center for Hawaiian Studies as their quote unquote sustainable. I do ecosystems and sustainable farming, hydroponics, and things like that. We call it malama'aina. But I got in that way in my tenure track position, but ended up being the instructional designer for the whole program and ultimately the school. But what happened though is another journey. So you think it was done. I had all these great tools. I had the strategies. I'm an instructional designer. Now I'm going to makahana ka'ike. I'm going to do, right? Put my hands, get in there and get dirty as being an instructional designer. You think that it would be over, but it wasn't. And so the next pivot for me was this research that I'm going to share with you now. And so I was in my tenure track position. I had worked 20 years. Here's some of the thoughts about it. There, at the time of this research, there were 20 instructional faculty. There's more now. And they were ranked from instructor to full. I had worked with them for 20 plus years, technology trainings, workshops, one-on-one sessions, anything instructional designers do, I was doing with them, right? And here's what was happening though. I was getting really frustrated being an instructional designer because I loved the work I was doing, but I had trained these faculty for so long. And yet I saw that as we were going to newer technologies, they were struggling. And I was frustrated because I was like, look, I'm writing all these grants. I'm bringing in all these things. I'm giving you an iPad initiative. I'm putting all these tools in your hands. And everyone was slow to shift. They were struggling and they were even resisting using some of these tools. And it was really frustrating me. And so, of course, as an academic does, you go to the research and start to look and think, oh, maybe somebody had an answer. And I started looking about teacher beliefs, right? And of course, the core concept is teacher beliefs influence their practice, right? I knew this. I trained teachers for 8 years in college. But then what was it? And so I really had to sit and reflect. And it was a good time for me to reflect. Well, first of all, I started thinking, well, who are we? We're Indigenous educators. That was important. And because of that, we have these distinct ways of knowing things I've been explaining to you throughout my whole story that I lean heavy on, right? And then I asked this question. And it was kind of far out there back then when I started asking this. Could these cultural beliefs be influencing my faculty decisions to use technology? And I looked heavy in the literature. And we talk about beliefs, teacher beliefs. They talk a lot about it, all the levels of teacher beliefs. But there was limited literature about cultural beliefs, like real cultural beliefs, not work culture, right? But cultural beliefs, ways of knowing that are ingrained in us. And so my question came out, how do Native Hawaiian faculty members, cultural beliefs, or ways of knowing influence their incorporation of instructional technology, and this is a little important, into their teaching in the past, the present, and the future? And I asked it that way and intentionally that way, because I'm going to explain to you, but for Native Hawaiians, the past, the present, and the future is part of our ways of knowing. We can't sit here in the present without looking back and looking forward at the same time. And I'm going to share a little bit about that. So ultimately, it became 9 participants. 8 of my instructional faculty agreed to participate in my research. And I was the 9th participant. Don't forget, you as the researcher participant is just as important, right, in this process. And that became really important to this research. Okay, so I got some other things there, full representation. They all total of 108 years of teaching experience in higher education, right, all together. And really interesting about my Indigenous faculty is that because we don't have a terminal degree in Hawaiian knowledge, not yet anyway, we're working towards it still and being recognized at the university level, which, you know, it's either here or there, represent 11 academic disciplines. So we're very multidisciplinary, very interdisciplinary in our research and our the ways we came through the academy. And they all identify as Native Hawaiian educators and are either familiar or proficient, I would say, with Hawaiian culture and language. So that puts us on equal ground. So I had to approach my research in a little different way. This was fun for my committee to explore and think about as well. But I had a conceptual framework. Well, it was really based off the concerns-based adoption model because I really liked the way they had the stages of concern. And one of them were beliefs, teacher beliefs. But I wanted to go deeper, right, in that one area of teacher beliefs. And so this is kind of what the model looks like to me, right? You have a teacher and how they integrate technology. They have attitudes and perceptions. They have their teaching pedagogy, value to things we know. But I wanted to ask, what about your cultural beliefs? What about your ways of knowing? And alongside of that, I had a methodological framework, right? And I'm gonna just read a little bit about it. It was grounded inside of in sort of an Indigenous framework, because we, as the participant and the researcher, have shared lived experience that we were both going to interact at the point of when we did this research, right? And so our ways of knowing were representative in those spheres, right? So the participant had a way of knowing, the researcher had a way of knowing, and for this space and place in this situated time, it was a Native Hawaiian way of knowing, right? So we had a shared and distinct, similar Hawaiian identity, history, culture, language, and ultimately view on self-determination and how we interact. So in this model, one way of knowing is represented in the model as a horizontal line. So you see those lines going across the participant and researcher. And that line represents what I was referring to earlier. Kawama mua, kawama hope. It is the time in front, literally, and the time in back. It's a little translation of a wise saying and a Hawaiian way of knowing. It's okay, I'm going to quote people who have talked about it. It's the perspective that describes the time that came before this time in which we live and the time which follows this time in which we live. So just thinking about it. One of our Native Hawaiian scholars, Kume'ele Hiva, explains it this way. It's the belief that every Hawaiian stands firmly in the present with their back to the future and their eyes fixed upon the past. So I'll read that one more time. We stand firmly in the present with our back to the future and our eyes fixed upon the past, seeking historical answers for present day dilemmas. So that's the methodological framework I was working off of, that we both have the shared situated place and knowledge. And when we interact, like the two circles interact at that line and become that distinct sphere representation, it merges together and becomes a co-narrative alongside, the conceptual framework. Okay, so I hope that's not too overwhelming. Breathe a little bit. Okay. And then, it took on a narrative inquiry study. It was very basic as research. I did interviews, I did a researcher journal, and I kept some reflective notes. Those notes included things that were happening and things I was feeling and cultural expressions that were made. That became really important to weave into the story, right, in the narrative. And then I will just say, it took many, right, dialogues and discussions. That's why the many hands are there. And actually, my students created that image for me. But it was a ha'i mo'olelo. So a mo'olelo is the story, right? But now it became a ha'i mo'olelo. Ha'i means to put together, bring together. It became a collective story, a collective narrative. And so I'm going to share with you what came out of that collective narrative now and how it helped me to resolve my question, not end my question, but resolve and move to the next part of the research that I'm doing. Oh, shucks, let me get there. Okay. So if I had to categorize, right, and it's a long story, I want you to know that I wrote it as a story in the end. It was a narrative piece. But if I had to categorize it, right, for people that asked, these were kind of the main themes that came out from the story. So our conversations together were familiar and filled with an ease that allowed for discourse like this to happen, of ways of knowing that were passed down from our ancestors and through our birthright as Native Hawaiians, is what I write in my conversations. Although the conversations would focus primarily, only really on technology use, right? All of these themes came out of it. When they talked about how they make decisions, what were the prevailing ways of knowing that influenced their decision making, how they use technology in their past, like what were their first experiences with technology and how did they use anything that helped make decisions about and make meaning of that, how they use it today and how they want to use it in the future. All three of these areas came out. And so it was relationship, was prevailing ways of knowing that influence it no matter what. There was a relationship that happened, respect, cultural protocols, representation, security, and protection, things that are kind of common. It was really interesting about relationship. But then a'u aku a'u mai comes through, which is that story is so important in all of this, that you have to get your hands dirty and do the work if you want to learn it. Also, that you have to ho'okama aina, and ho'okama aina for us is like, you have to be acquainted with it, but almost to be invited to it. because we're not the type of, our ways of knowing is just like, oh, I want to visit that person, I'm just going to go over to their house and walk in the door. So ho'okamaʻaina, I have to be acquainted, I have to have a relationship, I have to know them, I have to let them know I'm coming, and things like that. In old Hawaii, I'll tell you, not in old Hawaii, but you know, traditional Hawaii times, we used to have a symbol like, if you had a pineapple on your doorstep, that means you were letting visitors come and visit you. If you didn't, don't come and knock on my door. We had things like that went on in our culture. So ho'okamaʻaina is very common to us. And then ownership and makavalu. Makavalu means eyes and 8. So do you have 8 eyes to see the multiple perspectives around you in the things that you're working on? So those are some of the things that came out. I'm going to share off just a few because we only have a short time today. I'm going to get through these fast, and it's going to be kind of fun because I'll do it in the participants' words. But these were kind of the ones that came out, right? And then I'm going to tell you what I realized from some of it. And this is only a real sliver of what really came out, because it was a really long narrative and it was a rich narrative, especially for Native Hawaiian educators. But number one big thing I realized is that as a people and as a way of knowing, we are not time bound. So when applied to technology, what does that mean, right? So again, ikavama mua, ikavama hopi, the time in front, the time in back, we don't care. Wherever we're situated, we're seeing time all the time moving, right? Past, present, or inferred future. So this first statement was talking about, we have repositories of our kupuna, who are our ancestors, that have been recorded, and it's available to many. So this was one kumu, which is a teacher, reflecting on this. If we struggle with hearing our ancestors, right? Technology is allowed for spaces where we can go visit tutu. Tutu is grandma in Hawaiian. And ask. Through these resources, we acquaint ourselves with our kupuna, maybe our tutu, maybe our grandma, and their ike, their knowledge of the time, because we exist now in a very different time. So again, expressing that these things exist with technology, but it also brings the connection back to them, to the knowledge that maybe is not available in a living sense, but it's still living through technology. So that was one example that came through. This one is another one talking about technology and the relationship we have with technology first. So this kumu was talking about that. We need that relationship to exist, because if they have that relationship, then it helps them culturally connect to each other, to the places they're going to use that technology and the spaces at all times, not just in my class. So this was kind of the conversation, not just in my class in this moment, am I teaching them to have this relationship with the technology and me have a relationship with the technology, but I'm teaching them to have this relationship throughout time, right? Now in this class and into the future. So space all times, right? Because a lot of it is the impact, right? And that it could have harm. So we don't want them to have that bad relationship with technology. So not time bound, okay? One big finding. Something we should know, but you know, when they talk, then you get to see it better. The other one was a reciprocal relationship. This is really important. I think a lot of Indigenous people have reciprocal relationships with a lot of things, the environment, each other, all humanity. But for us, this was housed under kuleana. They talked a lot about kuleana. And for us, the word kuleana is a strong word. It means responsibility first, right? But it means also the rights that you have to take care of things, the authority that you might have. And so these were some of the thoughts that came through. I know that there are big and small impacts for our nation, for the generations that came after us. We all agree that we are here to work for our Lahui nation race. This was talking about technology use. I know I got to use it because there's going to be impacts for our nation. So things I saw early on in my journey, same thing, right? I knew that I needed to put technology in their hands because it's for the future. And then things like, what is okay to film, right? I'm going to take the digital camera with me, right? I'm going to let them film this, but what is okay? What is okay to portray? Did we ask permission? So building in those ways of knowing to the use of that technology. And then the last one, our relationship with something actually allows us to respect it, conserve it, protect it, and make sure it's going to be abundant in the future. And that was talking about the use of technologies that could be really extractive, right? So we do STEM in our field through Hawaiian lens, right? Through a Hawaiian knowledge lens. And our scientists who do ocean studies and things like that, they really don't use some of the tech tools that are very common in their field, although they know how, because of this relationship they have with it. You know, and it comes down to being the older sibling, younger sibling. If you're the older sibling, you teach those, like a kumu, a teacher, to protect and preserve those things and keep them safe. And so it's important that reciprocal relationship exists when we use technology. So another way of knowing that was very strong and should be very obvious. This is a fun one, pono. I hope you'll find it fun as well. But for us, pono means well-being in relationship. So again, it blends into the reciprocal relationship, but it's very clear. So for many, balance means 50-50. Everything's equal. But in the Hawaiian worldview, it could be 80-20. It could be 30-40. You know, it doesn't have to be equal on both sides to be pono, to have well-being. And that was important. It needs to be fair. It needs to be upright. It needs to be beneficial. And it doesn't need to be 50-50. That came through really strong. Here's some examples. I want students to have strong relationships with the environment and to use the tools to help us understand our environment more. But being in the environment is really important. And we need to always make that the priority before the technology, right? So obvious. We can use all these texts to see things, but what being in the environment teaches us is just as important. Where's that balance? What's equal or not equal? It doesn't have to be equal. Strongly expressed that the inability to convey culture through technology, because it's not the computer that conveys the culture. It is us, the individual. So teachers really expressing to me, we can use the tech all we want. I used it in my teaching, but that's not what's conveying the culture. It is us, right? So just thinking through how it's not balanced. This was a really fun one. I actually got to see the students work and it was beautiful. But a student created an app that built the whole moon calendar as a learning tool, right? It was a whole app that we introduced it into the Department of Education for elementary kids. But in the final reflection of his work, through their cultural lens, they shared the irony was that the best tool is just to go outside and look at the moon every day, right? So, you know, the balance, what is equal and not equal. And then one of my other kumu told us this, the accessibility of virtual reality and AI, and he uses it every day in his work and in his teaching. He said allows for experiences, but it can really detach us from the environment that we really want them to have an experience in. So what is equal and how they use it? It really came out strong in this area of pono. Okay, one more, hang in there with me. So the last one I'll bring together is the reciprocal relationship again, but this is in mahalo, and mahalo is like, we say thank you when we say mahalo. I say mahalo nui to a lot of people too, but it's really a respect and relationship. If you are humble enough to thank somebody, then you have that respect in that relationship, right? For this one, it was cultural protocol. We must be careful to respect their request to not take their image or record their person, because that is a means to bring harm to them, whether it's manipulation, spiritual of the image itself, or perhaps maybe the voice on a recorded video interview. I mean, if you are Kanaka, if you're Hawaiian, this is part of the protocol and your understanding of your culture. It has mana. So for us, even the visual image, the audio voice has mana, mean power. It has power that's sometimes unexplainable or appreciated or defined or understood in a Western culture. So mahalo, what is that respect and relationship? So even though they have the tool, should they be using it? And maybe that's why they don't. Like, I think, why? You went out there, you met this farmer that 90 years old giving you all this wisdom and ike, right? And you guys didn't video it? There was reasons, right? And so coming back to that reciprocal relation. Here's another one that, this one came out strong. I don't always lead with this one because I'm sad about it, but for many of my 20 plus years, not, senior faculty, this was always their rub with technology. So we couldn't put in like the diacritical markers, the kahako, the micron, and the uina, which is the glottal stop. And it became sort of a joke for us, a racist thing. Technology is discriminating against us as a people. And, I share this one because it is true. And it came out on almost every interview about this, that they didn't trust technology to begin with. So it's still that trust is not totally there, but they're trying, right? They are trying. But it's the same with mo'olelo, right? I got into the mo'olelo and the story because so many people were telling our story that wasn't really our story. But I knew if I empowered people with technology and the tool, they could tell the story, put it out there. And then people would be seeing stories from the real people, not other people telling their story. And so this is part of my journey too with tech, was because other people were using it to tell our story, same way that it wouldn't let us write in our own language. So what was the resolution of this whole story, right? And so my question, I got my answer, and it was strong. It absolutely influences the way Native Hawaiian faculty members relate to their technology, make decisions about how they use it, integrated it into their instruction, and evaluated, this was the strong one in the purple, evaluated when to continue or stop using that technology in their teaching. And that was really important to me because they might have used it for 2 years and then they decided, you know, this isn't working for my people. This isn't working for this environment. This isn't working for this space. And they just stopped. It's not that they weren't literate and it's not that they didn't have technology skills. It was because they've made a conscious choice. So voice and choice, I hope you see it coming through. I end with this research part with this and the cultural beliefs. But what pivoted me in my work as an instructional designer, a couple of things, but this is one core one, is that I needed to not just use the ADDIE model or the CBAM or all these models, but I needed to look at how my work was impacted. And part of it is this, it changed to a reciprocal model. All the areas were there. I still needed to do a needs assessment, right? I still needed to introduce things. I still needed to question, and I still needed those support structures and trainings and all those things to implement. But core to all of this has to be the cultural beliefs or ways of knowing. And now core to our conversations is the cultural beliefs and ways of knowing. And now core to that conversation, any one of these events can jump in at any time. So we can have a conversation about a core belief and I can do an invitation to a specific technology, or we can talk about instructional needs. What do you think would work there? Would it be a visual? Would it be an audio? Would it be more data analysis kind of thing? And at any time they are going to interact iteratively with whether it is appropriate for them. And then ultimately sustaining a support structure, training communities of practice around it. Because as they jumped into these small communities of practices that we've built over the years, you know, I had 20 plus years, so there's quite a few. They go to experts in their field, but experts in their field is like their older sibling. They go to another professor that's been using drones in their work and they talk story about it. Well, how did the community accept that, right? Things you probably wouldn't say if you're teaching, just I'm teaching them A, B, C, D, E, right? Here's my student outcomes for the drone. But that's not the conversations they talk about in the communities of practice. They're talking about the cultural beliefs and ways of knowing as well. And so this model became important for me. I shared it, you know, hopefully others will see it. So what's the big takeaway, right? A whole bunch. It's a shared living experience when you use technology. Cultural beliefs or ways of knowing can totally impact our technologies. And it impacted mine, right? And then the two takeaways I have about the story part. So one is voice, right? Put your voice in there, allow choice to be in there. And then the story, share those narratives. I didn't make space 20 years as an instructional designer and a Native Hawaiian educator to share those narratives. When we did, it opened up a whole new road for us. And then tell those stories to everyone. I'm so happy. Kay invited me to come and share this here. I was so happy to share some of this at AECT because the more we tell the stories, more we learn, the more our relationship with technology gets brighter and we can tell our mo'olelo. And so now here's where I am, right? I'm here in higher ed, hopefully 100,000 plus stories. I'm not over yet. I want to keep sharing those stories and all my faculty are doing that good work as well. I'm kind of wrapping it up. I'm bringing it to close. So hang in there with me, just a couple more minutes. But I want to tell you something else that came out of my research was really interesting. When I approached my research, I was an instructional designer that thought the cup was half empty, right? Why are they resisting? Why are they not? I'm so frustrated. But I left my research understanding that I'm a Native Hawaiian instructional designer and my cup is half full. There was no gap, really. It was already full. And these were some of the quotes that were coming through that really helped me see that they valued the fact that I'm a Native Hawaiian instructional designer working with them. I offered them opportunities to up their game. I'm being a mentor to them like a kua'ana older sibling. And I'm younger than a lot of my faculty. So that to me was a real honor. And that I was always there being the curator for them, bringing the tools to them, being that filter that helped them find the tools. So that was a good takeaway for me, that I need to lean in, even in my work as an instructional designer and in my design, all my ways of knowing. So like I've talked about all of these, so you're very familiar. I want to share what also inspired me over the years in my work. This is a field of lo'i, so a real cultivating, thriving field. But Graham Smith once told me at one of the conferences that we must develop our own theorizing and pedagogy. We must reclaim our imaginations from the colonizers. We must dream our own dreams. My journey, my story has been my dream. And we must set our own visions and goals in order to control more fully our own destinies. So our voices, our choices, and ultimately our stories is what we can move forward to do the work we do. And as an instructional designer, that has led my journey. I just end here because we started with an acknowledgement. I want to close that as well. And I end with asserting that this research was a contribution to the growing active body of Hawaiian knowledge that exists and the genealogy of Indigenous thought everywhere that will continue to inform contemporary issues. I offer my stories, and hopefully you offer yours as humble contributions to inform the work you do with your people. Specific for me, Native Hawaiians, because those who came before me and those who will come after me, they have work to do that will embrace technology to tell our stories to the world, to secure our archives and histories, to empower our identities, and to self-determine our relationship and role that we're going to have with technology into the future. And that's going to become important. And so that's it. That's all I have. We can talk a little bit. Hopefully we have a little more time. But I want to end with this because since I'm here and I'm Hawaiian, I'm going to share with you A'oli Ipau. We don't say the end. We say A'oli Ipau. And it means it's not finished. It's not over. And it continues. And I feel that way about my own work and that I'm still doing that, right? I'm still working there. And I share with you some of the icons of the places I work. So now I work in graduate division. This gives me an opportunity to work with all the programs with AI and voice, choice, and story about the way we're going to use AI into the future and how they're going to use it with their students and in their teaching. It's been really exciting. We don't have answers, so don't ask me for any answers. But we're getting close. And I'm still working with the Department of Education on NSF grants, advancing culturally relevant computing. And just recently, we got invited to Chuuk and Yap in the Pacific to go and share with their teachers how to design for culturally relevant computing lessons. And we just got invited to go to Costa Rica. So the work continues internationally, not just in Hawaii. So if you want to talk to me, I got my email there. I'll put it in the thing. But thank you for listening. I hope some of it spurred some of your stories as well. So I'm looking. Thank you. Thanks, Kay.
I got to say thank you so much, and thank you for saying what we kind of already know, that anybody who's working in this kind of field in any way, it doesn't matter what's going on, in DC, do the work.
Yeah. We are trying. We keep trying, and we will keep doing it.